Paul, we talked to Paul Stastny about face-offs, and they were such an important key in yesterday's game, and he wins that one on the winning goal. How big of a role do those play in games like that?
So there isn't really a correlation between face-offs success and expectation of winning, except that in a playoff game, and certainly in an overtime, it can be the key piece, right? You just need the one. I think in this series, that in the moments that we've been behind it in terms of face-off, we struggled a bit because they're such a strong possession team. If you're against an opponent that can really control the puck, I think face-offs become far more important. You've got to win those just to take it out of their hands early. And then it can be the difference in a game like it was last night. One face-off can be the difference to the shot. So I think you have to, when you look at the face-offs overall, I don't think it tells you much about the hockey team, how good the team is. But in terms of you get into any overtime single shot kind of game enders, face-offs become critical.
We'll go back to Ted Wyman for a follow-up. Go ahead, Ted.
Well, how do you handle the balance of the high of last night and coming back for a game so quickly?
Well, we tried to deal with it last night too. You get to enjoy it for an hour, and then we tried to get into our recovery as fast as we could, make sure everybody ate, make sure everybody got a lot of water in them, and then hopefully went home and got some sleep, got varying degrees of success in terms of coming down and winding down. But you know what? This is unique. It's unique to me in this league, and it's unique to any of these players. It's not something they faced. We've all played an awful lot of back-to-back games, but never in a playoff. The cost of each one of these games is so much higher than a regular season game. There's some unknown to it and how you'll come back. So I think both teams are going to try to play this game early as simply as they possibly can until they can kind of gauge where they're at with their legs. But we're both in the same boat, so it's going to be even at least.
We'll go next to Ken Weaver from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Weaver.
Thanks, Greg. Good afternoon, Paul. We've talked a lot about comfort level when it comes to Pierre-Luc Dubois. How did he find that comfort level last night, and what role did kind of adopting that shooter's mentality play in his game yesterday?
Yeah, I think having watched the playoffs and what it was going to be like, he adapted well to that, even on the wing. The other night, there's just not as many plays to be made through the neutral zone. I mean, other than one into the middle of the ice maybe last game. I think they did a really good job. What we're hoping for here is that kind of each player on that line plays their own game. And in that, they'll find chemistry. We don't want Pierre-Luc trying to play Nicky's game. But boy, a big man going to the net that can control pucks along the wall is really, really valuable to Nick Ehlers because you can get it to him up high. Stas is kind of the perfect mentor for the two. They're both unique in how they play, and you need another guy out there who can read unique players. Stas does a real good job with that. When you think of him coming in and playing with Nicky and Patrick, and this is like 3 years ago when these guys are really young, he could figure out what they were doing. With young players, sometimes that's a challenge. So we think we have the components there. They started in different positions. We moved them around just to see a different look, and I liked it.
We'll go back to Ken Weeb for a follow-up. Go ahead, Ken.
Paul, Pierre-Luc was obviously able to bring that one-timer to the second unit, but how would you describe the impact that Matthew Perreault has both in front of the net and creating chaos in the screens, but also in being able to dig out pucks and kind of cause some havoc for Mike Smith?
Yeah, so he's elemental to that power play success. His ability, Nicky Ehlers will pick that corner and we'll say that's a great shot. But you've seen it a bunch of times for not a big man. Matty Perreault's timing across the goaltender's eyes is like perfect. And then his puck recovery is, just bang on, and he scores a goal just staying on the puck. So the other part of it is it's an unusual personality power play. Matty's got this great energy, right? They get a power play and he goes out. He is all wired up. He's not thinking about the last one. He's all excited to be out there, and that's kind of contagious. Those five guys have fun. They have fun in practice when they're snapping it around. And he's got a big part of maybe the emotional energy that power play brings.
We'll go next to Sarah Oleski from TSN. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, Paul. You said that you guys tried to deal with it last night a little bit in anticipation of tonight. Can you have us, or do you have a sense of kind of the energy around your team right now going into this game?
I would say about an hour after the game, the room was really quiet, right? It just calm. And that's kind of what we wanted in the morning here. We don't want them wound up. So there's no pump up video this morning. We just did some detail stuff, had kind of get everybody fed, get them back for us. It's an unusual game for 8:30 start or whatever they've decided it is. So just tried to keep things very kind of calm this morning, and then we'll try to wind it all up tonight.
We'll go back to Sarah Lesky for a follow-up. Go ahead, Sarah.
Will you approach your pregame speech any differently for this game than you would have otherwise? And will you give a lot of thought to it maybe this afternoon?
Yeah, I have the general thread now but it would start with the video that we showed this morning. I'll just try it to the video tonight and talk about our personality as a team. I think, the personality that grows what you learn in games like last game and the first two, and then also, the core of who we are has to be the basis of what we do, and hopefully it's a hell of a lot funnier than that.
We'll go next to Paul Stravevsky from NHL.com.
Hi, Paul. You mentioned the high cost of these playoff games back scenarios. So I'm wondering, in your many years of coaching experience, do you find that getting these extra days of rest between series is a big factor or not so much?
I think that's really specific to your team situation. So, you've seen teams win Stanley Cups where they've had even more than one 7-game series, and they've kind of went from one right into the next and the way they went, right? And then you've seen teams, run a series, come out flat in the next and get beat quick, or run a series and they needed that rest. So I think it's kind of how you come through the series, how beat up you are. Sometimes you need all those days to get people healthy back to give you a chance. This is going to be unusual because I just don't see back-to-back playoff games, right? The cost of it. So it'll take a toll on both teams that they probably won't recover if it gets to game 7. I don't know the energy level of the series can stay as high because you threw a back-to-back in there. I think it will drop the energy level, not necessarily the competitiveness, not the intensity, but you're going to see two teams are going to have to really grind to get things to happen.
We'll go next to Mike McIntyre from the Free Press. Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks again, Gregor. Just sort of a follow-up, Paul, to my earlier lineup question. Just with you said how the playoffs back-to-back, we haven't seen anything like this. Does the mentality then change when it comes to your goaltender, where in a regular season game, maybe we're talking about your other guy going, but in a playoff game, that's not even a consideration?
Yeah, if the situation was different, you might consider it. If we got our A guy playing exceptionally well, there isn't a chance in hell that he's not starting tonight. We're not here for a long run. We're not talking about a 2-month run. We're talking about a 7-game series with the Oilers. We're going to play our best, and we're going to be as smart as we possibly can in terms of minutes, but we're not sitting those guys on the bench either, right? This is a full-on sprint, and there are only possibly 4 games left in this series, and we're going to play our best in every one of them.
We'll go next to Paul Friesen from the Sun. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Gregor. Paul, you guys are playing these games here at the peak of the pandemic in Manitoba, where hospitals are getting pounded. And I know you've talked about how much you appreciate your position you guys are in. Have you heard or seen anything concrete that tells you you're providing an escape and a distraction for people?
I got a friend of ours heard the story. Their Apple Watch fired off. You may need to sit down and rest, and they were just watching the game. The fitness alarm went off that the heart rate was too high. So at the very least, for one person in Manitoba, we're working on their conditioning.
We'll go next to Jeff Hamilton from the Free Press. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay. Hey, Paul, when the schedule first came out, we identified this back-to-back, and when we asked you, I don't know, the issue or whatever concern about it, you mentioned that the team that won the night before would have the advantage going in. And I'm kind of curious, just the way in which you were able to win yesterday's game, do you feel in a prime position to be able to match that intensity now? And as you alluded to, perhaps there won't be as much intensity or desperation given, it was 24 hours prior to play.
I probably hadn't anticipated at that point it'd be 3-0. So I think that the 3-0 part mandates Edmonton will have everything they've got thrown at us tonight, and that's going to ramp the intensity and let's game up. I think that you've always kind of used that day off to kind of recover a little bit mentally, even from the win, right? Just separate yourself from it so you can get back to focus. So I think we both have our challenges coming in here. For us, it's cutting the euphoria of that kind of win off, and for them, it's cutting the disappointment off for sure. And then I think that the situation of 3-0 means that they're going to be like as hard as they can, right? They all will push hard, and that's going to mandate that we do.
And final question to Scott Billick from the Sun. Go ahead, Scott.
Thanks, Gregor, and hey, Paul. It seems like when the playoffs start, you start to have to learn new things, I suppose, about your team. I mean, you asked your team to play a different game starting in game one. Last night, it seemed like you guys were able to increase your you increase the offense without really maybe increasing the risk profile at 4-1. What have you learned from your team through the first 3 games that you wanted to learn and maybe you didn't know that you were going to learn?
Yeah, I think there's just a little, I don't know if I learned this, but you'd hope that maturity that you thought you saw all year long was there and in the lineup, that they can sit on the bench and see the game and truly process what's going on. So when you're walking in between periods or you're showing video the next day, you're not surprising with anything, right? They've got a good feel. Like this series has changed, and I think we understood it. In the first 2 games, I think that they were looking for that rush game. It didn't materialize, and they went to a pretty forecheck game. Right? They spent less time in their neutral zone trying to wind it up. They were in and on us, and to a pretty darn good effect. They put a lot of pucks at the net from a point, and all of those are dangerous. And we scored 2 goals like that ourselves. So those are really dangerous plays. We handled it okay. We're going to expect more of that tonight. So I think we've got a maturity that we've been able to sense the change in a series, that you have to continue changing your series, right? You've got your foundation that you don't ever want to get away from, but you do have to adapt to what game it is, the location of the game, back-to-back nights, the score of the series, the risk profile change with the time on the clock. And I think that comes from, I think you can recognize that better if you have got some veteran players.
And final question to Jeff Hamilton from the Free Press. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks, Gregor. Awesome. Just news was announced on Logan Stanley there. Just kind of comments on that kind of penalty.
Yeah, you know what? When I came into the league, that was the scourge of the league. So there was, there really weren't a lot of hitting from behind at that point, because one player's never turned. Like they never ever did that, and it would have been a bench clearing ball probably 25 years ago. So those things weren't on our radar. But the low hit was, there were a bunch of guys getting, losing their legs for 6 months. It was a really major thing, and the league cracked down on it, and they started suspending guys. And a 2 or 3 game suspension 20 years ago was a huge deal, right? That never happened. And then it disappeared from the league. It truly did. Once they started suspending those guys, we stopped seeing it, and you just don't see it anymore. And it was, pretty obvious. And I think they handled it right, because it can't come back into the game, especially with the speed of these guys. If you start clipping guys at their knees at the speed these guys are going at now, the ramifications could be disastrous. So I'm glad it was handled the way it was handled.
Thanks very much, Coach. Thanks, everyone. We'll be back with you post game. Have a good day.